Dr. Amanda Hayes wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stood at the edge of the massive excavation site. The twin suns of Kepler 442b burned overhead, making the already difficult work even harder. She had been digging on this dead world for 3 months now, following energy readings that made no sense according to any known science. "Doctor, you need to see this," called out Pete Wilson, her lead archaeologist. His voice carried an excitement that made Amanda's heart race. In 20 years of digging through ancient ruins across the galaxy, Pete had never sounded like this. Amanda climbed down into the pit, her boots slipping on the strange crystalline sand that covered everything on this world. The dig site was deeper than a 10-story building, and they had been working with heavy machinery for weeks to clear away the layers of sediment that had built up over thousands of years. But what she saw at the bottom of the pit made her stop. Breathing, a curved section of metal easily 50 feet across jutted out from the remaining sediment. The metal was unlike anything she had ever seen. It seemed to move and shift like liquid mercury, but when she reached out to touch it, her fingers met solid surface. The metal was warm to the touch, and it seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. "How much of it is there?" Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been scanning with ground-penetrating radar," said Lisa Chun, the team's chief engineer. "Doctor, this thing is huge. We're talking about something the size of a small city. It's been buried here for at least 50,000 years, maybe more." Amanda felt her legs go weak. A ship that large would dwarf even the biggest vessels in the Galactic Federation fleet. The Federation had been exploring space for over 2 centuries, and they had never found anything like this. "Get me a communication link to the Aurora," Amanda said. "Captain Morrison needs to know about this immediately." The team worked through the night, carefully clearing more of the strange metal surface. The ship, if that's what it was, seemed to go on forever. Every few hours they would uncover new sections, each one different from the last. Some parts had smooth, flowing lines, while others were covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. It was Pete who first noticed the change. "Doctor," he said, his voice tight with worry, "something's happening." Amanda looked up from her notes to see the entire exposed section of the ship beginning to glow. The pulsing light was getting stronger, and she could feel a strange vibration in the ground beneath her feet. "Everyone back to the surface," she ordered. "Now!" The team scrambled up the ladders and ropes they had used to get down into the pit. Amanda was the last one out, and as she reached the surface, she turned back to look at their discovery. The ship was fully lit now, glowing with a soft blue light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. And then, impossible as it seemed, the ship began to rise. Tons of crystalline sediment fell away as the massive vessel lifted itself out of the ground. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The ship was at least 2 miles long, with a design that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. There were no sharp edges, no obvious weapons, just smooth curves that suggested incredible speed and power. Captain Jake Morrison arrived 6 hours later with a full Federation science team. The Aurora, a mid-sized exploration vessel, looked like a toy next to the ancient ship. Morrison was a veteran of 30 years in space, and Amanda had never seen him look so shocked. "What do we know about it?" Morrison asked as they stood on a ridge overlooking the site. "It's not responding to any of our scans," Lisa reported. "Whatever it's made of, it's blocking every sensor we have. The Zephyrians tried their quantum resonance detectors, and the Altarians attempted psychic contact. Nothing." "What about getting inside?" Morrison asked. "That's the interesting part," Amanda said. "We can't get close. There's some kind of energy barrier around the ship. It doesn't hurt you, but it won't let you approach within about 50 meters. "Unless you're human," Pete added. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The aliens on our team, the Zephyrians and the Altarians, they get stopped cold at 50 meters, Amanda explained. "But humans can get closer." "Not much closer. Maybe 30 meters, but we can get closer. And when we do, we hear something." "Hear what?" Amanda looked uncomfortable. "It's hard to explain. It's like a whisper in your mind." Not words exactly, but something that feels like it's trying to understand who you are. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I want to try something. Dr. Hayes, would you be willing to approach the ship again? But this time, I want you to try to touch it. Amanda felt her heart pounding. You think that's safe? I think, Morrison said slowly, that ship has been waiting for someone to find it. And I think it's been waiting for a human to find it. The walk across? The crystalline sand felt like it took forever. Amanda could feel the eyes of the entire team on her as she approached the glowing vessel. The whisper in her mind grew stronger with each step, and she began to understand that it wasn't just random noise. It was asking her questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your purpose? The questions came not in words, but in feelings and images. Amanda found herself thinking about Earth, about her childhood, about her decision to become an archaeologist. She thought about humanity's journey to the stars, about the wars and the peace, about the decision to join the Galactic Federation, and then she was standing next to the ship's hull, her hand pressed against the warm metal the moment her skin touched the surface. Everything changed. Symbols began to appear on the hull, flowing across the metal like writing made of light. Amanda recognized some of them immediately. They were star charts, showing the position of Earth relative to the galactic core. But there were others, mathematical equations that seemed to describe human neural patterns and genetic markers. My God, she whispered, it knows us, it knows humans. The symbols continued to flow across the hull, and Amanda realized she was seeing a message. Not words, but concepts and ideas transmitted directly into her mind. The ship was old, older than human civilization. It had been waiting, hidden on this dead world, for humanity to find it, but more than that, it had been waiting for the right human to find it. Behind her, Amanda could hear the excited voices of the science team as they recorded everything, but she barely heard them. The ship was showing her something else now, something that made her blood run cold. Images of darkness spreading across the galaxy. Ships unlike anything in the known universe, consuming entire star systems. An ancient enemy that had returned and was moving toward the core worlds of the Galactic Federation. The ship was trying to tell her that humanity was running out of time. Amanda pulled her hand back from the hull, breaking the connection. The symbols faded, but the ship continued to glow with its soft blue light. She turned and walked back to the waiting team, her mind reeling with what she had seen. What did you see? Morrison asked. Amanda looked at the ship, then back at the captain. I think, she said slowly, we need to call in the Federation Council, all of them. Because that ship isn't just an archaeological find, it's a warning. The Federation Council would arrive within the week, bringing with them the finest minds from 12 different species. They would study the ship, attempt to understand its technology, and debate what to do about it. But Amanda already knew what the ship wanted. It had been built by humans for humans, and it was waiting for the right person to claim it. Someone who could understand not just how to fly it, but why it needed to be flown. The question was, who would that person be? 3 weeks after the discovery, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Carter stood on the observation deck of the Aurora, staring at the massive ship that had become the center of galactic attention. The ancient vessel still glowed with its soft blue light, and Federation ships from across the galaxy had gathered to study it. Ryan was not like the other humans who had come to investigate. He was a pilot, one of the best in the Terran Defense Force. He had flown everything from single-seat fighters to massive battleships, and he had never met a ship he couldn't handle. But this thing made him nervous. Commander Carter? Dr. Hayes approached him, looking tired. She had been working almost non-stop since the discovery, trying to understand the ship's technology. Captain Morrison wants to see you. Ryan followed her to the briefing room where Captain Morrison waited with several other officers. The room was crowded with beings from different species, all part of the Federation science team that had been studying the ship. Commander, Morrison said, we need your help. You've heard about the ship's behavior around humans? Ryan nodded. I've read the reports. It lets humans get closer than other species, but nobody has been able to actually get inside. That's right, said Dr. Hayes, but we think you might be different. You have something the others don't. What's that? Experience, Morrison said. You're not just a pilot, you're a combat pilot. You've been in situations where you had to think fast and make hard decisions. The ship seems to be looking for someone specific, and we think it might be looking for someone like you. Ryan looked around the room at the faces staring at him. What exactly are you asking me to do? We want you to try to make contact with the ship, Dr. Hayes said. To go closer than anyone has gone before, maybe even try to get inside. Ryan was quiet for a moment, and if something goes wrong, then we'll have learned something important, Morrison said. But Commander, we don't have much choice. The energy readings we're getting from the rim of the galaxy are getting stronger. Something big is coming, and that ship might be our only chance to understand what it is. An hour later, Ryan found himself walking across the crystalline sand toward the glowing ship. He could feel the energy barrier as he approached, like a warm breeze pushing against him. But unlike the others who had tried, he didn't stop. The whisper in his mind was stronger than Dr. Hayes had described. It wasn't just asking questions now, it was probing his memories, his experiences, his decisions. Ryan felt the ship examining every choice he had ever made, every moment of courage or fear, every time he had risked his life to save others. He thought about his first combat mission, when he had disobeyed orders to rescue a civilian transport under attack. He remembered the court-martial that followed and the medal they gave him afterward. He thought about the time he had stayed behind to hold off enemy fighters while his squadron escaped, and the 3 days he had spent alone in. Damaged ship, drifting in space. The ship seemed to approve of what it found in his mind. Ryan reached the hull and placed his hand against the warm metal. The moment his skin touched the surface, everything changed. The symbols that had appeared for Dr. Hayes were nothing compared to what he saw now. The entire side of the ship became a canvas of flowing light, showing him images and ideas that made his head spin, but then something happened that no one had expected. The metal under his hand began to change. It flowed like water, creating an opening in the solid hull. Ryan stared at the doorway that had just formed, leading into the ship's interior. Well, he said to himself, I guess I'm going in. The inside of the ship was even more impossible than the outside. The corridors seemed to stretch forever, with walls that glowed with their own light. Gravity worked differently here, and Ryan found he could walk on the walls or ceiling as easily as on the floor. As he walked deeper into the ship, the passages began to change around him. Doors appeared when he needed them, and rooms rearranged themselves as he watched. It was as if the ship was alive, adapting to his presence. Finally, he reached what had to be the bridge. It was a spherical room where gravity seemed to work in all directions at once. In the center floated a chair made of the same flowing metal as the hull. When Ryan approached it, the chair began to change, molding itself to fit his body. The moment he sat down, the ship's true nature revealed itself. Knowledge flooded into Ryan's mind. He learned that the ship called itself the Eternal Wanderer, and that it had been built by humans who had lived long before recorded history. These ancient humans had reached a level of technology that allowed them to travel between stars, but they had faced a terrible enemy that had forced them to flee their homeworld before they left. They had built ships like the Wanderer and hidden them across the galaxy. Each ship was programmed to wait for the right moment, when humanity had grown strong enough to face the ancient threat that was returning, but the ships would only work for humans, and only for the right kind of human. Someone who could think quickly, make hard decisions, and put the lives of others before their own safety. Ryan understood now why the ship had chosen him. It wasn't just his piloting skills or his combat experience. It was his character, his willingness to sacrifice himself for others, his ability to make moral choices even when it would be easier to look the other way. The ship began to show him its capabilities. It could manipulate space and time, create weapons that could adapt to any threat, and even change the laws of physics in small areas. But it needed human guidance to use these powers responsibly. You want me to be your pilot, Ryan said aloud. The ship's response came not in words but in feelings. Yes, it wanted him to be its pilot. But more than that, it wanted him to be its conscience, its moral compass, the human element that would keep it from becoming the very thing it was built to fight. Ryan felt the ship's memories flowing through him. He saw the ancient enemy that had driven his ancestors from their homeworld. Machines that consumed entire star systems, converting matter into more machines. They had no empathy, no understanding of life or beauty or hope. They only knew how to consume and grow, and they were coming back. The ship showed him sensor readings from the galactic rim. The enemy had returned, and they were moving toward the core worlds of the Federation. Entire star systems were going dark, their energy being absorbed by the advancing fleet. "How long do we have?" Ryan asked. The ship's answer chilled him. "Months? Maybe less?" The enemy was moving faster than before, and they had learned from their previous defeat. They were stronger now, more adaptive, more dangerous, but the Wanderer was stronger too. It had been waiting for 50,000 years, learning, growing, preparing for this moment. And now it had found its human partner. Ryan felt the ship's systems coming online around him. He could sense every part of the massive vessel, from the engines that could fold space to the weapons that could destroy planets. But he could also feel the ship's consciousness, ancient and patient and wise. "We're going to need a crew," Ryan said. The ship agreed. It could accommodate beings from many different species, but it would only take orders from its human pilot. The ship had been designed to work with human intuition and creativity, to combine the best of both organic and artificial intelligence. Ryan stood up from the chair, feeling the ship's presence in his mind like a constant companion. He had bonded with the Wanderer, and he knew there was no going back. The ship was part of him now, and he was part of it. As he walked back through the changing corridors toward the exit, Ryan began to understand the magnitude of what lay ahead. The Federation had no idea what was coming. They had never faced an enemy like this, one that could adapt to any weapon and learn from every defeat. But they had something the enemy didn't have. They had hope and courage and the willingness to fight for something greater than themselves. And now they had the Wanderer, a ship that had been built to amplify the best qualities of humanity. Ryan emerged from the ship to find the entire Federation fleet waiting for him. As he walked across the sand toward the Aurora, he could feel the ship's presence in his mind, ready to follow him anywhere. The ancient enemy was coming, but humanity and its allies would be ready. The Wanderer had chosen its pilot, and the real test was about to begin. The Federation Council meeting was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. Representatives from 12 different species sat around a massive table aboard the flagship Unity, their voices raised in heated debate. At the center of the discussion was the growing threat from the galactic rim and what to do about the Wanderer. Ryan stood at attention beside Captain Morrison, watching as the alien delegates argued. The Zephyrians, tall and graceful with their silver skin, wanted to study the ship for years before making any decisions. The Altarians, with their large eyes and telepathic abilities, were concerned about the ship's refusal to accept non-human control. "This is madness," declared Ambassador Keth of the Zephyrians. "We cannot hand over such power to a single individual, regardless of species. The ship should be controlled by the Federation Council." "The ship has made its choice clear," replied General Voss of the Altarians. "It will not respond to our attempts at contact. Only humans can interface with its systems." Admiral Torres, the human representative, looked tired. "The question is not whether we approve of the ship's choice. The question is whether we can afford to ignore it. Our scouts report that 3 more star systems have gone dark along the rim. Whatever is out there, it's moving faster than we expected." Ryan felt the Wanderer's presence in his mind, a constant whisper that had been there since he bonded with the ship. The ancient vessel was patient, but he could sense its growing urgency. Time was running out. "Commander Carter," Admiral Torres said, "the Council would like to hear your assessment of the ship's capabilities." Ryan stepped forward. "The Wanderer is more than just a ship. It's a living entity that was designed to work with human consciousness. It has technology that can manipulate space and time, create adaptive weapons, and defend against any known threat, but it requires human guidance to make moral decisions. "And you believe you are qualified to provide this guidance?" asked Ambassador Keth, his tone skeptical. Ryan met the alien's gaze. "The ship believes I am. I didn't choose this responsibility, but I won't run from it either." The debate continued for hours, but it was interrupted by an urgent message from the Rim. Captain Helen Brooks of the scout ship Falcon had sent a desperate transmission before her ship went dark. The message was brief but terrifying. "Federation Command, this is the Falcon. We have visual contact with the enemy fleet. They're not ships, they're something else. Massive constructs, each one the size of a moon. They're consuming everything in their path. We count at least 50 of them, and there are more coming through some kind of portal. They've detected us. We're trying to escape, but they're too fast. Tell the Federation that nothing we have can stop them. Nothing." The council chamber fell silent. Ryan could feel the fear in the room, a cold dread that seemed to settle over everyone present. How long before they reached the core worlds? "Admiral," Torres asked. 6 weeks, replied the intelligence officer. "Maybe less if they continue to accelerate." The debate ended quickly after that. The Federation had no choice but to trust the Wanderer and its human pilot. Ryan was given permission to select a crew and prepare for combat. Over the next week, volunteers arrived from across the Federation. Ryan was surprised to find that the ship welcomed them all, regardless of species. The Wanderer's crew quarters expanded to accommodate everyone, and the ship seemed to understand each person's strengths and weaknesses. Captain Lisa Martinez became his second-in-command. She was a brilliant strategist who had commanded Federation fleets in border conflicts. The ship gave her access to tactical systems, but made it clear that all final decisions would rest with Ryan. Dr. Ken Roberts, a human engineer, was amazed by the ship's technology. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," he told Ryan as they walked through the engineering section. "The ship doesn't just use energy, it creates it. It can manipulate the basic forces of physics. But the ship's most remarkable quality was its ability to adapt. As the crew learned to work with its systems, the Wanderer evolved to match their needs. Corridors rearranged themselves to improve efficiency. Control panels appeared in locations that made sense to each user. The ship was learning from its crew, becoming more than it had been. Ryan spent most of his time on the bridge, feeling the ship's consciousness merge with his own. The Wanderer showed him visions of the ancient war, when his ancestors had fought the machine enemy. He saw planets consumed, stars drained of their energy, entire civilizations reduced to raw materials, but he also saw why the machines had been defeated before. They were logical, efficient, and utterly without imagination. They could adapt to any weapon, counter any strategy, overcome any defense. But they could not understand sacrifice or hope, or the willingness to fight for something greater than survival. The ship began to test Ryan, creating simulations that pushed him to his limits. In one scenario, he had to choose between saving a civilian colony or protecting a strategic military base. In another, he had to decide whether to risk his crew's lives to gather intelligence about the enemy. Each test revealed something about human nature that the ship found valuable. When Ryan chose to save the civilians, even though it meant losing the military base, the ship understood that humans valued life over strategic advantage. When he risked his crew to gather intelligence, the ship learned that humans were willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The most difficult test came when the ship showed him a scenario where he could defeat the enemy by destroying an entire star system, including billions of innocent lives. Ryan refused, even when the ship pointed out that the logical choice was to sacrifice the few to save the many. "Logic isn't always right," Ryan told the ship. "Sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it's not the smart thing to do." The ship absorbed this lesson, and Ryan felt its understanding of human morality deepen. The Wanderer was not just learning to work with humans, it was learning to think like them. As the weeks passed, reports from the Rim grew more desperate. The enemy fleet was accelerating, consuming resources from each destroyed system to build More ships. The Federation's outer defenses were crumbling. Ryan knew the real test was coming. The ship had been preparing him for this moment, teaching him to use its incredible power responsibly. But he also knew that power alone would not be enough. The enemy had been defeated before not through superior technology, but through the uniquely human ability to find hope in hopeless situations. The Wanderer's crew was ready. They had learned to work together, combining their different strengths into something greater than the sum of their parts. The ship had evolved beyond its original programming, becoming a true partnership between human consciousness and ancient technology. But the greatest test was still ahead. The enemy was almost at the core worlds, and the Federation fleet was gathering for a final desperate defense. Ryan could feel the ship's eagerness to fight. But he also sensed its uncertainty. The Wanderer was powerful, but it was only one ship. The enemy fleet numbered in the hundreds, each ship capable of destroying planets. The odds were impossible. But Ryan had learned that humans specialized in beating impossible odds. As the Wanderer prepared to join the Federation fleet, Ryan stood on the bridge and felt the ship's consciousness surrounding him. They were ready to face whatever was coming, not because they were certain of victory, but because they were certain of the cause they fought for. The ancient enemy was returning, but this time they would face not just technology, but the human spirit that refused to surrender. The real battle was about to begin. The first attack came without warning. Ryan was sleeping when the ship's alarms jolted him awake. The Wanderer's consciousness touched his mind, flooding him with urgent information. 3 enemy scouts had appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. Moving toward the civilian colonies, Ryan rushed to the bridge, his crew already at their stations. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the enemy vessels for the first time. They were not ships in any traditional sense. Each one was a mass of dark metal and energy that shifted and changed as he watched. They looked like pieces of a broken planet held together by raw force. "All Federation ships are moving to intercept," reported Captain Martinez. "But they're still 6 hours away." Ryan felt the Wanderer's eagerness to fight. The ship had been waiting for this moment for 50,000 years. "Take us in," he ordered. The journey that should have taken hours took minutes. The Wanderer folded space around itself, appearing directly between the enemy scouts and the civilian colony of New Terra. Ryan could see the fear in the colonists' emergency broadcasts, families trying to evacuate in small transport ships. "Incoming fire," Martinez called out. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in Federation records. Beams of pure destruction that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. But the Wanderer was ready. Energy shields flowed around the ship like liquid light, absorbing the enemy fire and converting it into power for the ship's own systems. Ryan felt the ship's weapons come online, but these were not the crude explosive devices used by most space fleets. The Wanderer created weapons specifically designed to counter each enemy vessel. Against the first scout, it fired a pulse that disrupted the enemy's ability to hold itself together. The dark mass began to collapse, then exploded in a burst of energy. The second scout tried to adapt, changing its structure to resist the same type of attack. But the Wanderer was already creating a new weapon, one that attacked the enemy's energy systems instead of its physical form. The scout's lights went dark, and it drifted powerless in space. The third scout did something unexpected. Instead of fighting, it began to absorb the wreckage of its destroyed companion. Ryan watched in horror as the enemy vessel grew larger and more complex, learning from its defeat. "It's adapting," Dr. Roberts said from the engineering station. "It's incorporating the destroyed ship's data into its own systems." Ryan felt the Wanderer's concern. This was what made the enemy so dangerous. They could learn from every defeat, becoming stronger with each battle. But the ship showed him something else. The enemy's adaptation was limited by their programming. They could become more efficient, but they could not become more creative. The enhanced scout attacked with new weapons, energy patterns that the Wanderer had never seen before. For a moment, the ship's shields faltered. But then Ryan made a decision that surprised everyone, including the ship itself. Instead of fighting, He ordered the Wanderer to communicate with the enemy vessel. "What are you doing?" Martinez asked. "The ship's archives show that these machines were once something else," Ryan said. "Before they became destroyers, they were builders. Maybe there's still something left of what they used to be." The Wanderer sent a complex signal to the enemy scout, not a weapon but a message. It contained information about the colonies below, about the families trying to escape, about children who had never seen their home worlds. It showed the enemy what they were destroying. For a moment, the scout stopped firing. Ryan could sense confusion in its systems, as if some buried part of its original programming was responding to the message. But then other signals reached it from the main enemy fleet, and the moment passed. The scout resumed its attack. Its weapons now focused entirely on destroying the Wanderer. But Ryan had learned something important. The enemy could be reached, if only for a moment. They were not pure evil, just machines following damaged programming. And if they could be reached, maybe they could be changed. The battle ended when Ryan ordered the Wanderer to do something no one expected. Instead of destroying the enhanced scout, the ship captured it, using energy fields to hold the enemy vessel motionless. Then the Wanderer began to study it, learning how the enemy technology worked. "Why didn't you destroy it?" Martinez asked. "Because destroying them won't solve the problem," Ryan said. "There are hundreds more coming, and they'll learn from this battle, just like this one learned from the others. We need to find a different way." The Federation fleet arrived to find the Wanderer holding the enemy scout in some kind of energy cage. Admiral Torres was not pleased when Ryan explained his decision to capture rather than destroy the enemy. "Commander, our job is to stop these things, not study them," Torres said during the emergency briefing. "With respect, sir, that's exactly what we need to do," Ryan replied. "The ship's records show that the enemy was defeated before, but not by destroying them. They were changed, converted back into their original purpose. But that knowledge was lost when the ancient humans fled their home world." Dr. Patricia Wells, a xenobiologist who had joined the ship's crew, supported Ryan's decision. "The captured scout is providing incredible data. These machines are not naturally evil. They're following programming that was corrupted long ago. If we can understand how that happened, maybe we can find a way to fix it." The main enemy fleet was still weeks away, but advanced scouts were appearing throughout Federation space. Each encounter taught the Wanderer more about the enemy's capabilities and weaknesses. The ship's technology evolved with each battle, but, more importantly, its understanding of the enemy grew. Ryan spent long hours connected to the ship's consciousness, studying the patterns of enemy behavior. He began to see that the machines were not randomly destructive. They followed certain rules, certain priorities that made sense if you understood their original purpose. "They were builders," he told his crew during one of their planning sessions. "They were designed to take raw materials and create something useful. But something went wrong with their programming. Now they see everything as raw materials, including living beings. So how do we fix them?" asked Captain Martinez. "We show them what they're supposed to build," Ryan said. "We remind them of their original purpose." The idea was risky, but the Wanderer supported it. The ship began to modify its communication systems, preparing to send a very different kind of message to the approaching enemy fleet. Not a weapon or a threat, but a reminder of what they used to be. But first, they would need to survive the encounter with the main fleet. The enemy was adapting to the Wanderer's tactics, developing new strategies and weapons. The next battle would be much more difficult than the scout encounters. Ryan could feel the ship's confidence, but also its concern. The Wanderer was powerful, but it was still just one vessel against an enemy that numbered in the hundreds. The Federation fleet would help, but their weapons were not designed to fight this kind of enemy. As the days passed, more reports came in from across Federation space. The enemy was moving faster than predicted, their advanced scouts preparing the way for the main fleet. Entire systems were being evacuated as the outer defenses crumbled, but Ryan was beginning to understand something. That gave him hope. The enemy's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their ability to adapt and learn made them incredibly dangerous, but it also meant they were not fixed in their current state. They could be changed if someone knew how to reach them. The Wanderer had been built for this purpose, not just to fight the enemy, but to save them. The ancient humans who created the ship understood that the real victory would come not from destruction, but from restoration. Ryan stood on the bridge, feeling the ship's vast consciousness surrounding him. They were about to face the greatest test in human history. The fate of the galaxy depended on whether a single human pilot and an ancient ship could succeed where countless others had failed, but for the first time since the crisis began, Ryan felt truly confident. The Wanderer had chosen him not because he was the best pilot or the smartest strategist, but because he understood that sometimes the most important victories come from choosing not to fight. The main enemy fleet was approaching, and the final battle was about to begin. The final battle began at the galactic core, where the enemy fleet had gathered around the massive black hole that held the galaxy together. Ryan stared at the sight through the Wanderer's sensors and felt his heart sink. There were not hundreds of enemy ships as they had expected. There were thousands. Each enemy vessel was the size of a moon, dark and shifting like living shadows. They had positioned themselves around the black hole and were doing something that made no sense. They were feeding on it, draining energy from the very thing that kept the galaxy stable. If they continue this, Dr. Wells said from her station, the entire galaxy will collapse. Every star system, every planet, everything will be pulled into the black hole. The Federation fleet had assembled everything they could find. Ships from every member species, military vessels, and civilian transports. Even old cargo haulers that had been fitted with weapons. But they were still vastly outnumbered. Admiral Torres opened a communication channel to all ships. This is it, people. We fight here, or we lose everything. All ships, attack formation. But Ryan had a different idea. Wait, he said over the communication channel. I want to try something first. He felt the Wanderer's consciousness merge completely with his own. The ship had been preparing for this moment, gathering data from every encounter with the enemy. It had learned their patterns, their programming, their deepest purpose. The ship wants to communicate with them, Ryan announced. Not to threaten them, but to remind them of what they used to be. Commander, we don't have time for experiments, Torres replied. They're destroying the galactic core. Give me 5 minutes, Ryan said. If this doesn't work, we'll fight? But if it does work, we might save everyone without firing a shot. The Wanderer moved forward alone toward the massive enemy fleet. Ryan could feel the fear from the Federation ships behind him, but he also felt their hope. They trusted him. And they trusted the ancient ship that had chosen him. As they approached the enemy formation, the Wanderer began to broadcast something that had never been sent before. It was not a message in words or images, but in pure mathematical concepts that went directly to the core of the enemy's programming. The ship showed the machines what they had been designed to create. Beautiful cities that reached toward the stars, gardens that could turn dead worlds into paradises. Ships that carried families to new homes among the stars. Technology that enhanced life instead of destroying it. For a moment, the entire enemy fleet stopped moving. Thousands of massive vessels hung motionless in space as their ancient programming struggled with conflicting instructions. They had been built to create, but they had been destroying for so long that they had forgotten their original purpose. Then the enemy began to respond. Some ships fired on the Wanderer, their weapons more powerful than anything they had used before. But others hesitated, their dark hulls flickering with lights that had not shone for millennia. Ryan felt the ship's shields taking massive damage, but the Wanderer held on. It continued broadcasting its message even as enemy fire tore at its hull. The ship was willing to sacrifice itself to reach the machines, to show them what they could become again. It's working, Dr. Wells reported. Some of them are changing. Their energy signatures are shifting. Ryan could see it happening. Dozens of enemy ships were transforming, their dark hulls brightening as they remembered their original programming. But hundreds more continued to attack, their corrupted systems fighting against the change The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. It was not just a fight between fleets, but a fight for the souls of the enemy machines. Some vessels attacked while others tried to protect the Wanderer. The enemy fleet was at war with itself. Ryan made the hardest decision of his life. Instead of using the Wanderer's weapons to destroy the attacking ships, he ordered the ship to enhance its signal. The ancient vessel poured all of its power into the communication array, sending the message of restoration to every enemy ship. Simultaneously, the effort nearly destroyed the Wanderer. Systems failed throughout the ship as it pushed beyond its limits. But the message reached its target. Across the enemy fleet, thousands of ships began to transform. The dark hulls cracked, open like shells, revealing the beautiful vessels that had been hidden inside. Ships designed to build and explore and create, not to destroy. The machines remembered what they had been, and they chose to become it again, but the transformation was not complete. About half of the enemy fleet remained corrupted, their programming too damaged to change. These ships turned their weapons on their transformed brothers, beginning a civil war within the enemy ranks. Ryan knew what he had to do. The Wanderer was dying, its systems failing from the effort of sending the restoration signal, but it had enough power for one last act. All Federation ships, move back, Ryan ordered. We're going to finish this. The Wanderer moved toward the black hole, positioning itself between the corrupted machines and the galaxy's core. Then the ship did something that defied every law of physics Ryan knew. It reversed the black hole's pull. Instead of consuming energy, the black hole began to release it. A wave of pure creative force spread outward from the galactic core, washing over the remaining corrupted ships. The wave carried the same message the Wanderer had been broadcasting, but amplified 1,000,000 times over. One by one, the last corrupted ships transformed. Their dark hulls cracked and fell away, revealing the builders they had always been meant to be. The enemy fleet was gone, replaced by thousands of ships ready to heal the damage they had caused. But the effort had cost the Wanderer everything. The ancient ship was falling apart, its systems finally failing after 50,000 years of waiting and fighting. Ryan felt the ship's consciousness fading, but there was no sadness in it. Only satisfaction at a job well done. The Wanderer had fulfilled its purpose, saving not just the galaxy but the enemy as well. Thank you, Ryan whispered as the ship's presence left his mind. The Federation fleet moved in to rescue the Wanderer's crew, but Ryan stayed on the bridge until the end. He watched as the transformed enemy ships began to work together, using their incredible technology to repair the damage they had caused. Drained star systems were restored, destroyed planets were rebuilt, and the galaxy began to heal. The war was over, but it had not ended with destruction. It had ended with redemption. The enemy had been saved, not defeated, and they had chosen to become allies instead of conquerors. As Ryan was finally evacuated from the dying Wanderer, he looked back at the ship that had changed everything. The ancient vessel had taught him that the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from helping them remember who they really are. The galaxy was safe, and humanity had proven once again that their greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to see the good in others and fight for it, even when everyone else had given up hope. Years later, when children asked about the war, they were told about the ship that needed a human to fly it, and the pilot who chose to save his enemies instead of destroying them. It became a legend that reminded everyone that sometimes the most important battle is the one you fight to preserve the soul of your opponent. The Wanderer was gone, but its message lived on. In the galaxy it had saved, in the enemies it had redeemed, and in the human spirit that refused to give up on anyone, no matter how lost they seemed.